You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. Violinists Nikki and Timothy Chooi are both decorated soloists in their own right and celebrated as a pair of Canada's most talented musical siblings. This week, they returned to Winnipeg and joined the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra as part of their spring festival. It's my pleasure to welcome back the brothers to Winnipeg's Classic 107 now. Hello to you both.
Hello. Great to
Well,
be here.
it's so great to see you again, and it's a real pleasure to connect with you for I think the third time. We sort of have this biennial Chooi checkup thing that goes on. It seems like every two and a
Totally.
bit years.
Mm-hmm.
So this time we're connecting just after your rehearsal with the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra. Nikki, how did it go?
I think it went really well. Yesterday was kind of a sandbox situation where we were exploring different ideas, sharing some opinions, and just working our way through the three Baroque concertos and this piece by Michael Osterley. And today we kind of, had a chance to run through all four pieces, and I think it's going to be great tonight and tomorrow.
I think so too, and I mean there is some pretty great music in here, and we're going to get to that in just a bit. But Timothy, how's it feel to be back in Winnipeg? The third time, I think, with your brother in tow, right?
Exactly. Winnipeg has been really, really great. I think fourth time actually.
Fourth,
So
yeah, losing
fourth time.
track. Hey, more times the merrier in my books.
I know. So every time we come back to this hotel, the Fort Garry Hotel, it feels like okay, this is our third home. It's really nice to be back in Winnipeg, and it's always such a great musical and artistic experience to work with the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra because there aren't that many similar organizations around Canada, and especially for Western Canada, I find this is extremely unique. So I had forgotten for sure after just going through a couple years of the pandemic of how invigorating it is to have an ensemble of this size.
I guess I should apologize. Actually, it's actually Professor Chooi now. Timothy, you're assistant professor violin at the University of Ottawa. What's that been like for you?
Oh, what's that been like for me? It's been such a huge experience for me in so many ways, and I'm learning so much. I realize now you really never stop learning,
Mm.
and this is all beyond just musical, administrative, but also just what do I have to offer and sort of reestablishing my values as an artist and what I contribute to young artists in Canada for the next generation. So for me, it's been a weird year just because of COVID still,
Mm.
and everything has been shifting online and in person. So hopefully next year it'll be a much more ideal, and we can start cracking down on whipping some of those students back into shape.
Well, speaking of those students, I mean, I'm curious. You mentioned doing the Zoom teaching thing. We've been, we continue to connect via Zoom. How have you been navigating juggling those students online and perhaps a little bit in person, and then also your busy performing schedule? Because I was looking at your website and you're booked pretty much solid through August.
Ah, good question. I ask myself that every day. I mean, and my students are extremely self-motivated, I think, and I think that makes a huge difference. I encourage them to do that as well. The online situation is definitely not ideal. And for both situations, because there are some students that are in a completely different country and our time zones just don't match up. So that for me has been the most difficult. But in terms of actually learning online, it's actually not been that bad because especially in the first semester when things were starting to open up before Omicron, it was actually really nice because we had a couple in person, and then students need, as I remember when I was a student, that there are times when I'm not ready for a full lesson. I just need a checkup. So then I would organize it that way. So I think that there's a lot of things to be learned still online on Zoom.
Nikki, when we last spoke, you'd just recently been appointed concertmaster of the Buffalo Philharmonic. The whole
Yeah.
COVID thing aside, how's that gig been going for you thus far?
So obviously the pandemic has we've been able to adjust, especially last season. We recorded our own projects
Mm-hmm.
for an empty hall, just for the community and all that. But starting this year, 2022, um, life seems to slowly roll back into what's considered normal. Obviously we still have to be careful and all that, but especially the month of February and into March, I'm able to play a week in Buffalo, go to Florida, week in Buffalo, go to Vancouver, week in Buffalo, and now in Winnipeg. So it's been starting to feel like how performances it's like again. And speaking about the position, it's been really wonderful to play with such a wonderful group of musicians in the Buffalo Phil, to work under Joanne Folletta, and it's been really great.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that. I think you both keep these absolutely remarkable schedules. Like, I don't know how you keep track of it all. I mean, you talk about bouncing from Buffalo to Florida. Meanwhile, Timothy's teaching somebody in a different time zone while also jumping over to Vancouver. I mean, like, it's got to feel nice to reconnect, even if for a short minute here in Winnipeg again, right?
Totally. It's any chance we get to play together, Timothy and I, it's like it's more than just a collaboration. There's a family reunion, brotherly reunion, you name it.
Yeah.
For better or worse.
Well, speaking of collaborating, this concert with the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra is led by the great Canadian keyboardist Luc Beaujolais. I'm really curious, and either of you can jump in on this one. Have you worked with Luc before?
Yeah. No. We've both of us have never worked with Luc, but we've heard so much amazing things about him. He's such a respected keyboardist, pianist, all-around musician all over Canada. And the first time I heard, or one of the first few times I heard about his name was during his collaboration with James Ennis. The recordings they made of the violin keyboard sonatas were, I listened to them, regularly is for inspiration. And to have him here, and he's such a wonderful person, such a wonderful and giving musician, a mentor almost, to share ideas, give suggestions. It's been really wonderful to work with him.
Well, I'm so glad that your paths have crossed here in Winnipeg. Last go round when you were in town, you performed the Bach Double. This time it's the Vivaldi Double. Timothy, how would you characterize this work?
The Vivaldi is it wakes you up. It's part of the Electro Harmonica series, and it's one that Nikki and I have been playing for a little bit now. We also have played the Concerto for 4 violins, and that was kind of the first time we started to explore this type of repertoire. It's one that is very much still, I think, transforming as we work on it, because there's so many ways of playing this, and this is just a really great opportunity for us to try out some of our craziest ideas and come up with something that's presentable, and with the orchestra as well, because it's so clear in form, it's so exciting, it's very, very, in some ways, the primitive version of all classical music. It all boils down to these very basic structures, and sometimes simplicity is the hardest thing to make sense out of.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, I like the part where you talk about having the opportunity to explore your craziest ideas in this concerto, sort of bouncing those ideas not only off the orchestra, but also playing off your brother as well. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And also playing with myself, just thinking about how I want to do it, because there's so many ideas. But the thing about something like this, it's so easy to go into being subtle. And I think being subtle is, in a piece like this, this piece has been played so many times. It's been around for almost 400 years now. So it's one that needs new inspiration. Otherwise, it gets old, I think.
Well, I think if listeners recall, and I'm sure that they do, your performance of the Bach Double, you are going to bring that fresh take. It was a performance that brought the house down. I was there in the audience. It was stellar. Still think about that performance, still reference that performance. And that was back in 2019 because it was one of those, right before the pandemic hit. And it was one of those sort of benchmark concerts for me. And I'm sure for many listeners here in town. Also on the program tonight, there's music of Bach, and there's also music of Gemignani, and a little bit more music of Bach. And then also on the program is music of Michael Osterley. His work Snow White, which was originally composed for MCO artist in residence Aslanoski. It's been reworked for the two of you to perform. Nikki, tell us a little bit about this one.
Yeah, so it's a piece that I think is trying to emulate, the Baroque style, with a little bit of folkiness to it. I hear some Bartok in there, there's a few Bartok pizzas in the cellos, and I think it's really fun to explore. Like I mentioned earlier, yesterday was, it takes a bit to put a piece or learn a piece by yourself that requires so much collaboration with others. So yesterday was our first run at it, and I think coming back today, we were able to explore different voices, sections to kind of shape and all that. And I think it's going to be great. I think the audience will have a great time listening to it. It's a piece that's very easy to understand, and all we have to do is just play the music and yeah.
He's been a favorite composer of the MCO, a number of commissions, including a cello concerto. And I think the MCO once described his writing as a sort of complicated minimalist style. And I think that might play into that accessibility. Does that sound about right to you, Timothy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so interesting because the way that we're approaching the Geminiani and the Vivaldi and even parts of the Bach is a modern take on a very old style of music, and it's a complete opposite. It's new music trying to imitate old type of form of music with modern technique. So it kind of has that opposition. So for me, I think that makes sense in some ways. Yeah.
Well, absolutely fascinating. I'm sure it's going to be a great show. It's such a pleasure having you both back here in Winnipeg. We are treated. It's like if one of you comes, the other comes, and I think I speak for all the audience when I say just how thrilling this is. Timothy, Nikki, thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Simon. It's great to be here.